Hi, I'm David Brown with Hilcomore Expedition Team. This is presentation number 13. It is the celestial star chart at Teotihuacan. I want to preface this by saying what we're presenting here is not evidence of a Book of Mormon city. We believe that the site of Teotihuacan is too far north to be part of the Nephite geography that took place in the Book of Mormon. What we do find here are so many consistent concepts that are congruent with the philosophies, even the cube of space that we found at Palenque, where the axis of earth to heaven is so important. Well, it's here on display. There are no glyphs at Teotihuacan. There is only artwork and architecture. And we believe that they embedded their belief system in the architecture. They built their buildings so intentionally that we can decipher their belief system from what they built. So we're going to present this to you. The first aspect that we're going to look at is the celestial chart. And so I'm going to begin with a passage from Psalms. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. And we are going to do our best to demonstrate that the Teotihuacanans, were using celestial references to glorify God. Teotihuacan is the most visited ancient site in the Western Hemisphere. It is not a Book of Mormon city. However, it was built by people who were descendants of the Jaredite culture, which we have identified as the Olmec. Teotihuacan is located about 40 kilometers northeast of Mexico City. It's right really in the heart of Mexico. In late 2009, archaeologist Neil Steedy and I were working on research to identify the celestial phenomenon known as the Bethlehem Star. We began focusing on a book published by David Hughes in 1979, where he studied all of the known celestial phenomenon between 10 BC and 9 AD. The Star of Bethlehem Mystery investigated comets, eclipses, meteor showers, conjunctions, and supernovas. The conclusion drawn by Mr. Hughes was that the best candidate for the Bethlehem Star is the 7 BC triple conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn. The reason for his conclusion is that the Bethlehem Star had to meet the following criteria. Number one, it had to appear in the east. It had to rise on the eastern horizon. It had to last long enough for people to travel great distances while following the star. This isn't something that just could happen over a period of just a few nights. That's not long enough for people to follow a star. This event had to last long enough for people to travel a great distance. And the last criteria is it had to appear and disappear. That is something that we pull from Matthew, where the record of Matthew states, when they, the 3 wise men, had heard the king, they departed, and lo, the star which they saw in the east went before them until it came and stood over where the young child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceeding great joy. That last phrase gives us the impression that perhaps there was a period of time when they had lost or didn't see the star, that something, they had rediscovered something that they had lost track of. And so when you have a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction that has a conjunction 3 times in a row, then It comes on, it goes off, it comes on, it goes off, and it comes on. The 7 BC triple conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn was the only event that fulfilled all the criteria. A conjunction is when two celestial bodies appear so close together in the night sky that the light emanating from it appears to be one light instead of two. The conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn in the constellation of Pisces begins in February of 7 BC, and the planets remain together in Pisces until February of 6 BC. It's almost an entire year that they are in the constellation of Pisces. They begin rising together in mid-March, with the first conjunction occurring in May, the second in September, and the final one in December. With this research material at the forefront of our minds, we visited Teotihuacan in March of 2010, and that is when we made a startling discovery. This is a satellite view of Teotihuacan. It is oriented due north. And the structures we're going to take a look at here. The main structure is the longest one. It runs all the way from the north to all the way on the south. It is called the Avenue of the Dead. It is about a 1.5 mile long causeway. At the very north is the Pyramid of the Moon. Directly in front of it is a series of altars that are in a circular orientation, and that is the Plaza of the Moon. Halfway down is the Pyramid of the Sun. It is the largest pyramid structure in the Western Hemisphere. It's mammoth. It lords over the entire site. Then there is the San Juan Canal. It is a canal. That is not the original river pathway. They intentionally dug a canal and rerouted that river so that it would be perpendicular to the Avenue of the Dead. Then there is a large bermed structure called the Citadel of Quetzalcoatl, and the centerpiece of that is the Pyramid of Quetzalcoatl. Here is the seminal question. What if Teotihuacan represents the celestial event known as the Bethlehem Star? Taking a look at our map again, what if the Citadel of Quetzalcoatl is actually representing the Earth, and the San Juan Canal is representing the horizon between things that are happening on the Earth and then what's happening in the night sky? And Jupiter and Saturn are being represented by the Pyramid of the Moon and the Plaza of the Moon. Jupiter being the larger, brighter star, but Saturn being a ring. And the orientation of the altars around a central altar gives you the concept of a ring. Both of those are on the Avenue of the Dead, which we believe is a timeline. And then what if the Pyramid of the Sun is actually representing the moon in the night sky? Does this theory work? Well, we're going to start breaking it down. If Jupiter is being represented by the Pyramid of the Moon, and Saturn is being represented by the circular altars around in front of the Pyramid of the Moon, and the Avenue of the Dead is a conjunction timeline, then we should be able to track things that are happening along the timeline. Now, notice Jupiter and Saturn are on the timeline. The moon is not. And that is, we believe, because Jupiter and Saturn are together in the same track in the night sky. The moon is a fast traveler. It doesn't stay in the same place. In 28 days, it makes a full cycle around the sky. And so, we believe that the moon is actually how it interacts with the timeline is being demonstrated with a series of walls. This is looking down onto the Avenue of the Dead, the south end of it, actually from the top of the Pyramid of the Sun. And you can see here that there are a series of walls that go across the Avenue of the Dead. We postulate that this is where the moon crosses the pathway of the conjunction. When we look at the series of interactions between the moon and Jupiter and Saturn over the period of the triple conjunction in Pisces, we see here that there are a series of dates where the moon crosses the pathway. And we're going to use these dates to mark where we are on the timeline. First, let's take a look at where the conjunction begins. On March 16th, Jupiter, Saturn, and Mercury are rising just before the sun rises in Pisces. We believe that that is the beginning point of the conjunction that is being represented by the San Juan Canal. That is the horizon where the conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn begins. So the beginning point for this particular timeline tracking is the San Juan Canal because it is the horizon. And that is the beginning of what they call the heliacal rising phase. In other words, this event is rising in the night sky before the sun comes up. On March 28th, you have a whole conglomeration of planets. There's Saturn, Mercury, Jupiter, Uranus, and the moon, which is a new moon. All 5 of those planets are bunched together in Pisces right before the sun comes up. And we believe that is represented then by the first wall. So the first wall on the Avenue of the Dead, we're going to designate as March 28th of 7 BC. The second time that the moon crosses the pathway of the conjunction is on April 25th. And we're going to mark the next wall then as April 25th. The next time the moon interacts with the conjunction is on May 22nd. So the next wall, we're going to mark May 22nd. So you see the progression that's going on here. Then the next time the moon interacts with a conjunction, it is on June 19th. The next wall, we will mark June 19th. The next time the moon interacts with a conjunction is July 16th. We'll mark the next wall July 16th. The next time is August 13th. And you can see it's almost a full moon. The Jupiter, Saturn, and the moon are very close together. And so the next wall we will mark August 13th. And then on September 9th, we have something that happens that's very unique. And this is where the Pyramid of the Sun is set right up against the timeline, the conjunction timeline on the Avenue of the Dead. That is on sunset of September 8th, going into the night time of September 9th. And so we're going to take a look at this because the Pyramid of the Sun is positioned where the full moon triune event takes place. And because it is the largest structure on the site, it appears that something significant is happening here. It appears that some type of transition is occurring. So we will investigate this intersection of the moon with the conjunction timeline on this particular day. We take a look here and we see that the sun sets at 6:45 p.m. on September 8th. And then over on the left, we see Jupiter, Saturn, and the moon all rising together like 25 minutes later. So it's not even dark yet. This is in that dusk period, and they begin rising. When they get to the zenith at 1 o'clock in the morning, Jupiter, Saturn, and the moon are in a perfect equilateral triangle. And then, when they set in the west, the moon is starting to pull away, but the sun is already up in the morning. So this is an event that lasts the entire night. As prophecy given 5 years prior to the birth of Christ, Samuel the Lamanite provides this. And behold, this will I give unto you for a sign at the time of his coming. For behold, there shall be great lights in heaven, insomuch that in the night before he cometh there shall be no darkness, insomuch that it shall appear unto man as if it was day. Therefore there shall be one day and a night and a day, as if it were one day, and there were no night. And this shall be unto you for a sign, for ye shall know of the rising of the sun, and also of its setting. So right here, he's telling us, it's not like the planets are out of their normal function. The sun's still going to rise, it's still going to set. You're going to know when that happens. It's just when it sets, it's not going to get dark. It's going to stay light. Then 5 years later, some of the believers were rounded up and provided with an opportunity to recant their faith or die for it. Nephi, the son of Nephi the missionary, provides this record. And it came to pass that he cried mightily unto the Lord all that day. And behold, the voice of the Lord came unto him, saying, Lift up your head and be of good cheer, for behold, the time is at hand, and on this night shall the sign be given. And on the morrow come I into the world, to show unto the world that I will fulfill all that which I have caused to be spoken by the mouth of my holy prophets. And then a few verses later, For behold, at the going down of the sun there was no darkness, and the people began to be astonished, because there was no darkness when the night came. So again, an affirmation. It's not like the earth stopped spinning for a moment and the sun never set. It is, they watched the sun go down, but it never got dark. This is the only conjunction involving Jupiter, Saturn, and a full moon that lasts the entire night in the Western Hemisphere. And this conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn with the full moon is not recorded in the Eastern Hemisphere because this event occurs only in the Western Hemisphere. By the time the Earth revolves the night sky to the Eastern Hemisphere, the full moon, Jupiter, and Saturn have separated from their tight configuration. Once again, let's take a look at this. The rising on the left-hand side, Jupiter and Saturn and the moon. This particular program that I've captured here is 7 BC. It's at Mexico City. And so it's letting you know what they see in the night sky from that location. And so rising in the east, Jupiter, Saturn, and the moon are just now starting to come together. The east coast of the United States may be seeing this, but no one in Europe is seeing it, clear on the other side of the Atlantic. And then only the people in the Western Hemisphere are seeing this event when the moon, Jupiter, and Saturn are in their triune position at 1 o'clock in the morning. No one else can see this going on. This is only happening in the Western Hemisphere. And then when these planets set, the moon is already starting to move away and the sun is already in the night sky. So maybe some people in the Pacific saw the tight configuration of Jupiter, Saturn, and the moon, but certainly no one in the Asia area saw it. This is the point where we really began to research the possibility that the architectural design at Teotihuacan gives specific information, and we found that this theory seemed to work on several levels. Once again, we're proposing here that Jupiter and Saturn are represented by the Pyramid of the Moon and the Plaza of the Moon on the north end of the Avenue of the Dead. The Avenue of the Dead is the conjunction timeline. The Pyramid of the Sun is actually representing the moon, and the San Juan Canal is representing the horizon between Earth and the sky. So let's take a look at some specifics here. I'm showing you a photo that's indicating due north and due east. If we take a look at the Avenue of the Dead, its orientation is 15.5 degrees east of north. And the east-west axis orientation of the Pyramid of the Sun is 15.5 degrees south of east. So it appears that the Avenue of the Dead and the Pyramid of the Sun are truly perpendicular to one another. But let's take a look at the east-west axis, because this is the rising and setting of planets. On the evening of September 8th, 7 BC, the sun set 7 degrees 5 minutes north of west. So we're going to chart that on our graph. 25 minutes later, the moon rose 8 degrees 35 minutes south of east. We'll chart that on our graph. The variation between those two, we have 7 degrees 5 minutes north of west and 8 degrees 35 minutes south of east. That comes to a total of 15 degrees 40 minutes, which is 15.5 degrees. That is the angle of the east-west axis of the Pyramid of the Sun. It is facing 15.5 degrees north. If the Pyramid of the Sun represents the position of the moon, then it is facing 15.5 degrees north to indicate that the sun set 15.5 degrees north of where the moon rose. This means that the orientation of the Pyramid of the Sun is demonstrating the relationship of the sun with the moon. The source of light is the sun, which the moon reflects into our night. This fits very well with the aspect of the moon representing the role of Christ, who came to do his Father's will and to reflect that will into our human experience. So if the orientation of the east-west axis is 15.5 degrees, to demonstrate that the sun set 15.5 degrees north of where the moon rose, then is there something that's being indicated by the 15.5 degrees east of north of the Avenue of the Dead? This is an image of the night sky that we had off of our computer program that illustrates the position of Jupiter, Saturn, and the moon just like 30 minutes after they rose on the nights off the horizon on the east. This is the position that they're in. This is about the time period where the setting sun has now gone far enough below the horizon that you're starting to see a darkness in the east, and you're beginning to see all of the brighter luminaries begin to show up. This is the position of those planets, and when we take and run a line from the center of Jupiter through the center of Saturn, and then run another line from the center of Jupiter through the center of the moon, we get an angle of 15.5 degrees. Is it possible that the 15.5 degree angle demonstrates the triangular relationship when these planets rose in the eastern sky? and were being seen for the first time. If it is the case that we are able to validate that the position of the pyramids are representing planetary alignments, can we also find validation for the Avenue of the Dead as a timeline? Now remember, here we're looking down onto the Avenue of the Dead from the top of the Pyramid of the Sun. And you see where each of these plazas are being created by the walls that go across the Avenue of the Dead. And you can see that there is a rise in the elevation until the Avenue of the Dead gets to the point where it's right in front of the Pyramid of the Sun. And then from that point forward to the end of the Avenue of the Dead, where the Pyramid of the Moon is located, it seems relatively flat. Why is that? I went out to Google Earth, and on Google Earth, you can do elevations. And here we found the elevation of the Avenue of the Dead at the San Juan Canal is 7,505 feet above sea level. And the next plaza is up to 7,514. And the next one, 7,520. The next one, 7,527. And then 7,539. And then 7,546. And then 7,550. And it stays relatively flat the rest of the way. What we believe this is indicating is when you start at the San Juan Canal, that is the beginning of the heliacal rising phase. And every night, the rising of the conjunction is getting higher and higher in the night sky until it gets to the point where it's the all-night event. And then shortly after that, it goes into the acronical rising phase, which means it's no longer rising in the eastern sky. Now it's already in the night sky when the sun sets. Therefore, the Avenue of the Dead is giving us a rise in elevation to help us understand or to validate the fact that this is a timeline, and the rising phase is from San Juan Canal to the Pyramid of the Sun. That's when the elevations of the Avenue of the Dead stops rising, and from there on it's flat because there is no rising taking place. The planets are already in the night sky when the sun sets. What is the purpose of the three-pyramid plaza that empties into the second sunken plaza of the Avenue of the Dead? And the point I'm making here is, if you look at all these structures along the Avenue of the Dead, only this three-pyramid plaza encroaches into the plazas on the Avenue of the Dead. It actually encroaches, and it takes up an extra 10 or 15 feet on that one edge. Why? Why would that happen? And it's the only place where that happens. Does the three-pyramid structure indicate the time frame when the three wise men began to follow the star event? If so, why here in the Americas? One thing to take into consideration is that three-pyramid plaza is a plaza of jaguars. There are jaguar heads that are represented at the base of the stairwell in the original construction. And the indication there is royalty. There are inscriptions at Palenque, and we saw this, telling of three gods who follow a sky event to present gifts to a baby god. Is this the story of the three wise men found in the book of Matthew? And I believe it is. This is indicating that somewhere between April 25th and May 22nd, the wise men began their journey, somewhere in May of 7 BC. They entered into the timeline and began following it and going to visit the Christ child. And what about the north end of the Avenue of the Dead? What might it represent concerning the timeline of the conjunction? Well, there are 12 satellite pyramids around the central altar. Can this represent the wise men arriving at the land of 12 tribes to present their gifts? It's possible. We don't have any affirmation. That's very possible, though. Something I do want to point out is the east-west axis of the Pyramid of the Sun intersects the Avenue of the Dead at exactly the midpoint between the San Juan Canal and the backside of the Pyramid of the Moon. It is the halfway point. And this is very important when we come on to later things that we cover concerning the cube of space and its illustration here. But there is an amazing body of evidence that the layout of the structures north of the San Juan Canal are demonstrating the celestial event of the 7 BC Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. This event must have been very important for a society to invest so much of their time, talent, and treasure. This had to be a message that they regarded as sacred. And we find Book of Mormon scripture that specifically mentions a celestial phenomenon that occurred the night before Christ was born. The orientations and positions of the structures fit this night exactly. And we say that not knowing necessarily whether or not that Moon-Jupiter-Saturn conjunction could actually produce the kind of light that is described as being as bright as noonday or bright as day, as if the sun never set. But I don't know that any of us have ever seen something like that before. The point being that this is the only regular motion of planets that provides an event that lasts the whole night. And here at Teotihuacan, we find that it appears that the architecture is speaking to us. Instead of glyphs, they're using architecture to lay out a timeline and tell us a specific date. The sunset of September 8th and the rising of the event during the night. Though for those of us who have done the research, there is no doubt. This is a testimony of the day that Christ was born, September 9th, 7 BC. The next two presentations will further illustrate how all of the structures along the Avenue of the Dead testify to the birth of Jesus Christ and to his ultimate purpose. So, we just finished the presentation, number 13, on the celestial star chart at Teotihuacan. Again, there is no written language here at Teotihuacan. They are relying on conveying a message through architecture, mathematics, and Kabbalistic values that are embedded in language understandings. And specifically, we're going to get to the Hebrew language at some point here. The point being that they invested an incredible amount of energy to map this date and to put things into a decipherable format so that someone later on with the right information would be able to unlock it. While this is not a Book of Mormon city as far as one that's identifiable in the text of the Book of Mormon, this is clearly a Golden Age city, a time when there were no more ites, and everyone, it said everyone throughout the lands had a belief in Christ and were unified in that belief. We look forward to presentation number 14, where where we're going to talk specifically about the Citadel of Quetzalcoatl and what's involved there. So we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you.